Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of SuperFantaFi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Motherland, Fort Salem. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. This is it, the penultimate episode of the series. A lot of really interesting things. First and foremost, we finally catch up with Wade, the Marshal, and M. It seems that while they were escaping, the Marshal ended up crashing because, well, you should have figured as much that one of his biddies dying would have essentially one of his equivalency to the biddies, to Alder's biddies, ended up dying. And so it had an effect on him. Apparently, like, he rapidly aged. So, I'm wondering, did he fill that void a little bit, or did he just keep, maybe just a, because he seemed okay later on, so he might have found someone else to kind of temper a place, that Biddy just kind of like, Alder did. To be fair, she has like the mycelium keeping her going now without the whole Biddy situation, so that's why, like, she doesn't really need that anymore, but he still kind of does, so I'm curious to see what that means in the long run, like, whether or not he did. Probably won't get an answer to that, but I'm curious, like, how he is okay. You know, because, like, you need all of that to kind of keep an equilibrium. So, not unless he's just going forward with one less biddy, and they're kind of, like, doubling up to compensate for that, the other marshals, or, like I said, maybe he found another replacement like Alder has in the past. Either way, putting that aside, Scylla, Rael, Abigail, and Tally are, making the ultimate sacrifice. As Petra says, like, it took her a long time to learn the lesson that Abigail did, that sometimes a leader has to know when to call it quits, because there's so much death that's going to happen, not just on the, not just on the Fort Salem side of things, but also with the session. So this is the only way to make sure everything, all the senseless violence stops. So now they're being questioned, and they're being tortured and questioned, but made sure not to leave any physical marks, because they need to make the trial, like, to be fair, there were cameras on them all when they were turning themselves over to the army, so they can't necessarily kill them, but they're pumping them for information about the first song, about where Rael was while she was gone. So, and they also learn about Scylla and Rael going to be married, and same thing for Adil and Abigail, but they wanted to at least wait until the whole situation with Khalida is kind of resolved, and then they do this. But ultimately, they are put on trial. Granted, the whole trial was a farce, because the whole point is, like, right, their guilt is guaranteed. We need to basically get not just a jury against them, we need the entire U.S. public against them, because we don't want them dying and being treated like martyrs. We need to make the world see and understand how scary Witches is, because then it legitimizes even more what the Camarilla is doing, so that they have the more general public on their side. They also won't have to do everything in secret. They'd probably be able to do it a lot more in open, and the public will be very receptive of that. So no matter how that trial was going to go, it was always going to go to Camarilla's side of things, because everything was stacked against them. Obviously, the prosecutors on the Camarilla side, so as the judge, so, like, the hammer was going to come down hard. So never even giving them an opportunity. Is like, I was about to say, like, too, like, do they not even have a lawyer in this situation? Because they didn't have anyone defending them. It's like, that seemed super unconstitutional, but I guess it's like, maybe because of the Salem Accords and stuff like that, witches aren't given the same 100% platitude and just rights that just a typical U.S. Citizen would. So maybe that's why, because they didn't even have a lawyer or anything. And you would think at the very least that would be, well, to be fair, even if they had a lawyer, who's to say that lawyer wouldn't be appointed? The lawyer they were appointed, who's to say it wouldn't be someone Camarilla trying to sabotage them? Because they had to basically defend themselves. But once again, they never were given an opportunity to kind of speak, and no lawyer on their part to be like, objection, Your Honor. Once again, he would have just been like, like, wouldn't have been, it wouldn't, once again, it was always skewed against them anyway. So, using everything that they've done against them, Penelope's death, the death of the hostages back in, season 1, that whole situation when they ended up destroying that vehicle. So, like, all that kind of, I believe that's the instance that they're referencing when they talk about, like, civilians dying. So I think that's the only instance I can think of. Maybe there's others I'm not remembering, but that when they basically windsheared that vehicle, not realizing that the hostages were inside. Like, I want to say, wasn't that near the end of season 1? That might have been like episode 8, maybe? I want to say maybe that's the instance they're referencing. Either way, they leave it up to Raelle to be the one who speaks. And she talks from her position of, yeah, my mom was a witch in the army, my dad is a civilian, so she comes from both worlds. And it's like, right, I was completely against joining the army because I knew what it meant. It meant I would just end up dying like my mom did. But obviously it changed her mind. Like, everything we did good, and like, she's proud of what they've done. You know, it's like, right, the camaraderie. Like, you want to judge us public, fine, but don't allow them to use this trial as some pretense to persecute and hold it against all witches. Because at the end of the day, we're not that different from you. We're just like you. Yeah, we have these powers and stuff, but that we're just regular people, just like you. We feel we go through everything that you go through. And the judge made sure to shut that down. It seems like, right, that's the end of day 1 of the trial. I was expecting the whole episode to kind of revolve around that, because at the same time, they can't even bring Penelope out, because it's like, right, that'd probably do more harm than good, because then it'd be like, oh, like, what did they do to my daughter? They made her into a monster, so on and so forth. Like, it just wouldn't do them any good. At the time, they still didn't know where President Wade was until she steps in. I was like, is that going to be Nicta? But it's like, no, I think the marshal, well, we see the marshal later on, but with everyone there, and Sterling is disguised as the guy that Petra killed last episode, that's meant to supposed to be her oversight. It's like, oh yeah, this is for Penelope. And it's like, no, they disguise people's faces all the time. And Silver's like, Wade's like, oh, you don't think it's me, Blatant? Bam! Pimp slaps him. I'm like, kablow! I'm like, yeah. She's like, check my fingerprints. I was like, could it be Nicta in disguise? But then the moment she made a press conference, I was like, oh no, that's the real her, especially when M and the warden are behind her. So you're like, not the warden, the marshal is behind her. So it's like, okay. So she pardons the girls for everything that they've been up to. Obviously, everyone Camarillo related gets arrested, including Silver, for his responsibility in all this. And President Wade talks about everything going forward, that they need to make things right, because it's like, right, we got to fix so much stuff, you know, not just the corruption here, but there's like so much here in the U.S. we have to fix. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more cooperation going forward between the U.S. and the session, so kind of like growing that partnership that we're kind of in this together. I was like, at first I was like, wait, I think at that point in the episode, it was like, what, maybe 15 minutes in the episode. I'm like, this is a good chunk of the episode still left. I was like, wow. Because I thought the trial would have been like all the episode. Is like, no. I mean, to be fair, it kind of makes sense considering like there's only one episode left after this. So they probably wanted to kind of like run through everything like pretty quickly. There's a lot they had to get through in only 10 episodes. So the fact is that ended up happening. At the same time, there's the whole situation with Alder still in that ice cavern, you know, talking to the witch that's there, but it's like, right, she's off using Tally's sight to see other things, so it's like, right, who'd you talk to? All you had were these brutes for company, you know. How did you survive? And now she's stuck here too. Like, eventually probably would have like, well, unfortunately she's not encased in ice. I don't know how long she would have naturally lived with the mycelium. I mean, because the reason why she can't get out of there is because the mycelium doesn't reach that far. So that's why once again, they made a point of that last episode when her and Tally went there, being like, yeah, they had to walk part of that way because the mycelium doesn't stretch that far. So she has no connection, no mycelium to kind of tap into to like teleport all over the place. Like, she doesn't have full access to that range, so she is kind of just stuck there. And she sings her song that's like, right, it might bring the entire cavern down on us, but for her it's like, right, at the very least, I'm not going to wait to wither away here or spend centuries here like you, because once again, like, I don't know how like long her circumstances would have lasted under that, because like, she's still connected to the mycelium. Even the mycelium is not there, she can't utilize its power, so maybe she would have eventually straight up, well, she does eat now, so she probably would have eventually starved and died, maybe. But luckily, she talks about it, Kalita was able to find her and literally move him out. And I guess maybe the mycelium, once again, just kind of steamrolling past a lot of stuff like, oh, how did that? Don't worry about it. So like maybe like the mycelium knew that she was in trouble and sent Kalita, who apparently literally moved the entire mountain to save her. So that is happening. Everyone finds out. Obviously, Kara and Hurst are going. They've disappeared. You're like, okay, so we're not done with that quite yet. But obviously, there's the conversation of, well, now that everything's, peaceful again, it's like they had at very least a week of peacefulness to some extent, because Raelle and Scylla went to her lighthouse for a couple of days, while Abigail was like, oh, no, I'm going to be the one taking care of everything. She was kind of the wedding planner and stuff like that. And I love it. Like, oh, it's okay, we add one more person's like, yeah, sure, Raelle, it is your wedding after all. I'm just the one putting it together. But it's like, yeah, it's because it was introducing Kalita. She was back, and Adil and Abigail can make this a thing happen now, because it's like, right, your family, our family is here, so making it a double wedding, and this is exactly what Scylla and Raelle would want. It's like, right, we want this to take this opportunity. It's like, we have no idea what the future holds, so like, let's take this opportunity to kind of enjoy the happiness and grasp it with both hands, like, while we can, and I thought that was beautiful. Minerva, her grandmother, like, giving her the dress. It's like, it's one of the lasting like pieces of their history. Like, so much has been lost over the years, and this is kind of like one of those last pieces of kind of their history. And I thought that was beautiful too when she had a conversation with her mom, because her mom says like, right, what Abigail did the last episode with the hail and everything, it's like no one in their family's ever done that work before. But Abigail's like, yeah, but Grandma said, like, our history was lost. Like, who knows, like, what we, the Bellwethers, are fully capable of that we just aren't aware of. But regardless of it all, for Petra, it's like, the fact of the matter is, the Camarilla may have stolen stuff from us, but our work is our legacy, and they will never take that from us. So, because she was looking at pictures of her ancestor, Jem, and it's like, it's one of her earliest memories. And I think it kind of plays into, all Abigail's notion of always wanting to be like so great because of her ancestry, because of her mom. It was almost this beautiful full circle thing of like, right, here's her ancestor, here's her, the latest generation of the Bellwethers, and then there's two previous generations behind her, her mom and her grandmother. So I thought that was kind of beautiful in its own right. It is interesting because, like, to my recollection, the last wedding in the show was Charvel's, her cousin's, and I was like, right, obviously we know how that sadly ended, so it seemed nice that the Bellwethers get some happy wedding at the very least, and it kind of being such a large event, I even love that line from Edwin when he was talking to Scylla. I was like, yeah, enjoy calling me Edwin for the next couple hours, because after that you're going to have to start calling me Dad, and she was almost kind of like, like, it was already like that to begin with, to some extent. Like, he was already very fatherly to her, but now it's like, it's making it even more official. And I love, like, him walking Raelle down the aisle. The fact is that Petra walks Abigail down the aisle. It's so beautiful. Also, Grigori returns. I'm like, yeah, it's squeezing you in, like, one more time. I was like, because, you popped in from here and there throughout season 2, so I was like, oh, I guess, but he was, like, locked up because of his association with the Bellwether unit. But for him, it's like, no, it was a badge of honor, them torturing me for that. But then, like, him and Tally, because I was like, oh, dude, this episode, first and foremost, was riddled with so many couples. It's like Anacostia and Sterling, because she's like, I don't know what I'd do without you. And he's like, well, you're never going to have to find out. Because, you're like, well, he almost died before, and now you're like, Jesus, you saying that was the same equivalency. You're like, one more day till retirement. It's like, don't say that, because now it feels like you might die in the end. God knows who will and won't survive this, especially because now they managed to squeeze in one more, like, significant death in this episode, so we'll talk about that when we get to the end. But it was just kind of enjoying, like, what they have. It's like, right, let's celebrate our friends and the people we care about. And then Anacostia and Sarah is like, she's like, I know you have like a million questions. She's like, not a single one. And hugs her. I'm like, yeah! because you haven't had that opportunity yet. You know who else hasn't had that opportunity, and maybe they will in the next episode? They've talked around it. We have not had a Nikta and Sarah face-to-face since last season. So I am curious, like, after everything is all this said and done, with everything going on, they have to have one. Like, just Anacostia and Sarah having that moment, them hugging, is all we needed. Like, that was a beautiful moment between them. There's probably a lot they talked about in between that you don't get in the episode, but that in itself is enough. Because Anacostia is pretty much a daughter to Sarah. I mean, a lot of people are Sarah's daughters, but yeah, Anacostia in particular. So, also the other thing I was thinking about too is like, man, there are so many weddings lately across the board in so many different shows. Like, obviously, like, well, in Riverdale, Archie and Betty were going to get married. Granted, we haven't gotten that, but we might get that in the future. There was a wedding in season 3 of The Umbrella Academy, without spoiling things. There was also, most recently, a wedding in Lock and Key. It's wedding season, which is funny because there's a show literally called Wedding Season with Rosa Salazar coming out, like, I think next month on Hulu. So it's just like, just the timing is just like, weddings are in the air. I actually don't know when wedding season is. Actually, I should look into that, because you always hear about that, but I never actually know when exactly, what time frame that is. Anyway, it's kind of beside the point, but it's just like, there's just like so much love in the air, and it's just like culminating so many stories, and with all this, like, especially like when they were gathered around listening to Rael play the guitar and sing, there was like, you know, it's like, oh, we coupled up, it's like Sterling and Anacostia, Abigail and Adele, Rael and Scylla, Gregoria and Tally, which I even love when they're like making out during the thing. He pauses, says like, it's almost like she's judging us, talking about the painting, and Tyler looks and goes, yeah, just let her watch. I was like, ooh, real freaky naughty. That's probably like the one thing I always quote from Dodgeball. I don't know why that line just has for all these years has always stayed with me. Real freaky naughty. Anyway. Obviously there's so much on the horizon they know, but they wanted to focus on the good, but that's also the thing. The good times never last nearly long enough. Like I said, they had kind of like a week or so of peace, but then the Camarilla starts making their moves, because of course they would, because Hearst is still out there. So also Sarah ended up leaving, like she didn't stay for the wedding because she still has a job to do. There's still one piece of the song out there. You know, and it's like, well, will we even need it with the way things are? And it's like, well, maybe not, but Sarah's like, I don't want to take that chance because there's still a good chance we will need the first song. So it's like, right, enjoy things while we can, because, once again, this won't last forever. So that happened, and then Nikta, I love her showing up at the wedding. She's like, yeah, I wanted to drop by a little bit. It's like, oh yeah, you're staying. She's like, all right, I'm staying. I'm like, oh, they got plenty of food here. She's kind of enjoying the celebrations and everything. And the president comes up to her. It's like, oh, I know who you are. You can't be forgiven for all that you've done. Which even Nikta's like, right. What Anacostia brought up like last episode really sat with her, because she's like, right, everything she's ever done, all the killings and stuff like that, in her mind, it was all for witches, from their freedom from, like, your court and just being under the thumbs of people, having to abide, like, kind of their own freedom. But now she recognizes, like, right, the Camarilla are worldwide doing shit, and it's kind of on me, because I am the one that stoked the flames. I helped expedite a lot of this witch fear-mongering, and I just made the Camarilla's cause that much stronger. So, but use me and my talents and what I know to battle the Camarilla. And I was like, oh, okay. And she's like, right, whatever we do, there is not going to be a pardon on the table. And Nikta realizes that, she recognizes that, yeah, I completely understand, Madam President. So makes you wonder, like, will she, like, die in the process of all of this, or will she survive kind of working with the president, kind of, to some extent? I'd almost wonder, like, kind of like your obviously with no, it's, you know, your typical, like, kind of Neil Caffrey, like, white-collar situation of, like, cool, like, you will be kind of a consultant of sorts. That way you don't have to worry about going to, like, jail or even being executed. So that's going to be your penance, is working with me from now on. So, like, whether she'll be, like, staffed with the president or not, probably not, because the last thing you want is the general public to know that you're working with a known domestic terrorist, but probably keep that super hush. There's probably only certain people at the top will know. But it's like, right, you could use her expertise and what she knows to battle the Camarilla, and that could be helpful, obviously, on the domestic front, and, you know, obviously probably would help to some extent maybe on the international front, maybe at least having her by your side when you talk to other international leaders about how to handle the Camarilla thing going forward and just the relationships with witches in general. I mean, having someone like that, kind of her view on things, like, yes, she is the most extremist side of things when it comes to the witches, but I think it's a point of view you need to kind of give you some perspective on, like, right, because she's kind of bumped heads with, like, Sarah and in particular when it came to the whole witches and human fronts. Like, she was semi-ally, but she was also kind of an enemy, especially when she found out what Sarah had done, like manipulate her when, like Petra had warned her. To be fair, Petra was playing like, oh, let me get this position I'm kind of gunning for. So everyone's kind of out for their own at that time, but we're all kind of coming together against this greater enemy of the Camarilla, which they end up attacking Fort Salem and end up, I was like, yeah. Well, also, we got to see Isadora throw down. I was like, yo, because Isadora's always just been the scientist. I don't think we've ever seen her, like, throw down. And I was like, oh, they gave her one big sequence just so they could end up killing her. I thought that would end up setting Penelope off, but I think it, you know, like, obviously seeing Hurst again, I think it kind of scared her, because obviously she's not in the right state of mind. It's like, oh, wait till Silver sees this. I'm like, how is he going to react? I still think she's going to end up killing her dad. Just, it would be very poetic in the end. It'd almost be very poetic. I don't know who I want to end up being the one to kill Hurst. I don't know whether I want it to be Abigail, Rael, or Penelope. It's hard to say at this point in time, but him killing Isadora was heartbreaking. It's like, damn. I was hoping like Penelope would snap, kill all of them, and maybe heal Isadora, but I mean, she hadn't fully died yet by the end of the episode. She was still bleeding out, sadly, and had to watch as he goes to the mycelium. So, and we see that, you know, he ends up doing something, because at that moment Rael's eyes glow blue and her mouth starts bleeding. So obviously, like, her ties to the mycelium are still there, and she's not vegan. Like, if she dies again, there's no resurrection this time. Like, this will be the end all be all for her. So this happening to her means it's most likely happening to Sarah wherever she is. Well, she did say like she was going to be in Africa looking for the last piece, following the particular witch line there that has the final piece to the song. But kind of like a very dire like final shot of the episode with like Rael bleeding from her mouth like that with the blue eyes. Because that's kind of like, at the very least, it seems like that's the main nervous system that typically gets associated with the mycelium. So the other places the other dig sites were like protected. This is the mycelium out in the open, so he probably did something to it at this point, and now it's spreading to the rest of the mycelium. And now, because also, like, if the mycelium dies, it takes away it allows them to do what they do, is the mycelium. So maybe the first song can also stop the witch bomb, but also heal the mycelium. Maybe that's what that is. Or maybe the first song, like, even though the mycelium's gone, the first song can allow them to all carry a piece of the mother with them, so it carries on to some extent. It's like, not unless you think like Rael ends up becoming like the mother going forward. Like, it has to be like a sacrifice thing of like, I hope that's not the case. Like, I want everyone to have a happily ever after, but that doesn't seem like that. This could be a show that doesn't end that way, but either way, it could. I was thinking like maybe she becomes part of the mycelium and something kind of becomes a mother going forward. Not unless like that ends up becoming Sarah's role. Like, because I get a feeling, like I said, Sarah's not going to make it out of this series. I think she's going to return to the mycelium and return to rest, and maybe, you know, or maybe she will be out and about. I don't know. I'm curious to see how that works out. What her and Rael's fates are going to end up being. We'll ultimately have to wait and see. Like I said, next episode is in fact the series finale, and I'm so fascinated to see how this plays out. You know, once again, there are going to be some losses in this. It's just going to be a matter of how it all plays out. you can't, I hope, like, once again, I hope nothing happens to Rael, because it's like, you can't have a situation where they just had their wedding, her and Scylla and Abigail and Adil. And you can't take that, you know, it's like, well, to be fair, it's like, we're going from one happy moment to kind of a sad moment, even in this episode alone, so, but I hope that doesn't get, like, undone. I'm very fascinated to see where the series finale takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.